They thought they were facing ordinary men riflemen with bolt-action weapons, slow and predictable. But when the first shots cracked through the jungle fog, Japanese soldiers froze. Something wasn't right. The sound wasn't a few rifles, it was a storm of bullets, continuous, unrelenting, like dozens of machine guns firing at once. Their training hadn't prepared them for this. What they heard wasn't just noise, it was a message. The Americans weren't just shooting, they were declaring dominance. On the islands of the Pacific, where every inch of land was soaked in blood, Japanese soldiers had learned to expect hesitation. Most Allied units followed cautious routines: advance slowly, wait for backup, use artillery to soften resistance. But the Americans who stormed ashore in the later battles were different. They didn't crawl, they ran, they didn't wait, they hunted. And when they fired, it wasn't just a shot, it was a flood. That terrifying rhythm of firepower, steady, fast, accurate, left many Japanese commanders convinced the Americans had violated the laws of combat. The truth was even more unsettling. These were standard-issue M1 Garands, not machine guns. But in the hands of well-trained American infantry, they became something far more terrifying. Semi-automatic, 8-round clips, fired with lethal speed and near-perfect coordination. When one soldier reloaded, his buddy kept firing. And when dozens did it together, the result was a psychological sledgehammer. At Guadalcanal, a captured Japanese officer admitted he thought every American had his own automatic weapon. His men couldn't understand how the Americans sustained that kind of fire. The enemy had believed that bravery and bayonets would be enough. But charging into a wall of rapid semi-automatic fire was suicide. Jungle ambush failed. Banzai charges collapsed before they reached the line. And once fear took hold, it spread faster than fire. One night in New Guinea, a Japanese patrol stumbled into an American defensive line. Expecting a chaotic scramble, they instead triggered a coordinated storm. Within seconds, every rifle along the foxhole line opened up, crack, crack, relentless. And measured, no shouting, no hesitation, just deadly rhythm. Survivors said it felt like walking into a buzzsaw, and those who made it out never wanted to go back. But the power of the M1 Garand wasn't just mechanical. It was psychological. Japanese soldiers had been raised on the myth of American softness, that U.S. troops were weak, distracted by luxury, unwilling to fight face to face. But each battle rewrote that myth in blood. The American rifleman wasn't soft. He was calm. He was trained, and he fired like thunder. And this was just the beginning. What came next wasn't just about firepower, it was about fear, morale, and the complete collapse of an entire strategy built on close-quarter shock. The Japanese were ready for rifles. They weren't ready for what those rifles became in American hands. In the sweltering chaos of Saipan, Japanese forces launched one of their final massive banzai charges. Thousands rushed forward under cover of darkness, screaming into the night. They believed their sheer will would break the American lines, but the Americans didn't panic. They didn't retreat. They stood shoulder to shoulder, rifles aimed, breathing slow. And then, as if on cue, the horizon lit up with muzzle flashes. Dozens of M1 Garands answered the scream with rhythm. Not frantic, not sporadic. Just precise, thunderous volleys, one after another. By morning, over 4,000 Japanese troops lay silent. Survivors stopped calling it bravery. They began calling it madness. The rifle itself was revolutionary. While other nations still issued bolt-action rifles that demanded a pause between every shot, the M1 Garand allowed the American infantry to keep pressing forward with sustained fire. In close quarters, that meant a decisive edge. In long-range engagements, it meant control of the field. But the weapon alone wasn't the terror, it was how Americans used it. Their doctrine demanded every rifleman be a marksman. From the sands of Iwo Jima to the cliffs of Okinawa, they fired not in panic, but with ruthless intent. Behind the lines, Japanese engineers studied captured Garands with disbelief. They tested the weapon, pulled it apart, tried to understand how this tool so simple, so effective had turned the tide. But no matter how many they analyzed, the answer was the same. It wasn't just the rifle. It was the discipline, the training, and the sheer relentlessness of American units wielding it like a scalpel. No amount of steel or tactics could overcome that psychological wall of sound and speed. By the final months of the war, whispers spread through Japanese ranks. Some units refused to advance when they heard the Garand's distinct ping. That high-pitched metallic ring, when the clip ejected, meant only one thing. The shooter was still alive, still firing, and about to reload with deadly precision. To many, it was more chilling than the thud of artillery. And yet, through it all, American soldiers weren't invincible. They bled, they lost brothers. But what set them apart, what made their presence so terrifying, was the resolve behind the trigger. A 16-pound rifle in calm, determined hands spoke louder than any propaganda. To face an American line was to face silence, patience, and then a thunderstorm of bullets. Not just one rifleman, but an entire platoon firing as one heartbeat. In the end, Japanese troops didn't just fear the Garand. They feared what it represented. A nation that had once been underestimated. A soldier who didn't run, didn't shout, didn't hesitate. A rifleman who fired with the force of history behind him. That's why every jungle path, every ridge, every final stand carried that dread, not of tanks, not of planes, but of Americans in foxholes, rifles in hand, firing like machine gunners, and standing their ground with unshakable steel.